Throughout the year 2021, Marvel has taken their cinematic universe to new heights on both movie screens and television screens alike. From all of the series that they had streaming on Disney Plus to the newest movie releases, this year has been a step in the right direction for Marvel. That's why I'm going to be taking a look back at every Marvel release that came out in 2021 and ranking them from worst to best. Let's get started. So at number 9, I have the movie Eternals. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I didn't really like this movie all that much. I've heard a lot of people say the same thing, and if you look at its score on like Rotten Tomatoes and things, it's safe to say that critics didn't really like it either. I think they said it got the lowest percentage on Rotten Tomatoes that any Marvel movie has had so far, so that's not really that great. And also, you know a movie is bad if you have to watch YouTube videos about it to understand the plot better, because that's what I had to do. I came home and I was confused by what exactly happened. I had to basically look up the plot because the way it was shown on the movie didn't really make sense to me, so I had to kind of get a better understanding of it. And I've never had to do that before with a Marvel movie, but this made me do that. The biggest issue I think I had with this movie was that it didn't really get me invested in the characters all that much. All we're basically told is that the Eternals were created by these Celestials and were sent to Earth to make sure that the celestial giant that was buried in the Earth and was being incubated by the Earth's core was given enough energy to finally rise out of the Earth and come to life. Other than that, there isn't really much of a backstory for any of these characters, or why they have the specific powers that they do, like Icarus can fly and shoot lasers out of his hands and things like that. So it's I didn't feel like I connected with them the way I did with other MCU characters that we've seen in the past. Also, the plot just kind of seemed to bounce back and forth, in my opinion. It went from past events to the present and back to the past, and it kind of just... I know what they were going for. It was meant to show that the Eternals have been here for a lot of things that have happened, not just in the MCU's past, but also in just Earth's past in general. They were there for world wars and all this other stuff, and it showed them during those, but some of it didn't really make any sense to me when it was bouncing back and forth between the modern day and those past events that they lived through. Even though I didn't really understand fully what was going on, there was still at least one moment from that movie that actually kind of made me pay attention a little. And it's really the only thing that I actually kind of remember from this movie. And that was when the celestial that was living in the Earth began to rise up out of the Earth and stuff. It was a moment that felt truly terrifying as I was watching it because of how massive the Celestial was. Seeing his hand and his head come up out of the Earth and everything was that brought me chills. And it kind of made me feel the same way I did when we thought Thanos was going to snap again in Avengers Endgame when he got the stones before Tony Stark snatched him away. It was that uh-oh moment, what happens if he does this? That's kind of the same thing I felt here. It's if this thing does rise up out of the Earth, it's going to blow up the Earth. And of course, the Eternals were fighting with each other, so they weren't paying attention. That's the only memorable moment that I had from this whole movie. The only thing that I can really remember from it and take away from it. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie around it didn't live up to the expectations for me. Even after seeing the trailers and everything, I thought, okay, I'll give this a chance. Maybe it'll be a good plot or whatever. I'm alright, cool, they're introducing new characters, but it didn't live up to my expectations. I don't know how it did for you. Let me know down in the comments section if you enjoyed Eternals or not. Next up at number 8, I have The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. While the series did have a few moments that left their mark on the MCU as a whole, the show itself was kind of messy. Now, I am willing to give Marvel the benefit of the doubt here because they did reveal that they had to cut a lot of things and change a lot of things because of the pandemic. But I feel like they could have still put together a better show than what we got. The premise of the show was fine, because it dealt with Sam Wilson, or Falcon, trying to fight for the legacy of Captain America, while the government just wanted to replace Steve Rogers. But the rest of the plot was kind of all over the place. There were some almost entire episodes that just focused on like Sam visiting with his sister or helping her fix her boat and things like that, which didn't really further the plot any and kind of felt unnecessary. Like, I think there was one episode, it was like a 30-minute episode, and I think like 20 minutes of it was just Sam and Bucky helping Sam's sister fix the boat. And that kind of took me out of it a little bit. And there were other moments that were mainly just needless talking among some of the characters that I feel that should have been cut instead of something else that actually did get cut. They could have done a better job of like what they chose to cut and leave in and everything else. I know the Sam and his sister stuff was meant to be like sort of character development for Sam, but it didn't. I don't feel like we really needed it because the plot was already there, the premise was already good. He's already struggling with something. We didn't really need this too, I don't feel like. It was also unclear when I was watching this who exactly was meant to be like the main villain of the series. If you think about it, there were at least 4 different villains in this series, which seemed like a bit too much, because you had the power broker, who they didn't know who it was at first, but it turned out to be Sharon Carter. You had Zemo was kind of a villain, like we weren't sure exactly what his intentions were. Then I guess technically like the government or the the GRC, which was the Global Repatriation Council, who were responsible for like putting people back or finding people homes for all the people that blipped away. They were responsible for finding them new homes because their homes were now occupied by other people and things like that. So they were in charge of handling that. And then kind of the government was in there a little bit, and then you also have the like John Walker being the new Captain America and stuff. Like he ended up being a scumbag. I called him Captain Scumerica when I did my review of this, so go check out that video if you haven't seen my review of that yet. And it kind of felt like they didn't know the direction they were going with the plot, and kind of set up a bunch of different things all at once without paying off on some of them. I feel like they could have done a better job with that. Really, the show's only highlight was in the last episode when Sam got his own Captain America suit and officially adopted the title, even though, everybody was against him being Captain America. The show did an excellent job of showing Sam's struggle, like, with his own morals as he tried to decide whether or not it was worth fighting for Captain America's legacy. Because at first he gave it to, he gave the shield and the suit and everything to a museum. And then, the government came in and took it from the museum and gave it to John Walker so that they could make their new Captain America. And then the show did manage to replace Steve Rogers as Captain America in a meaningful way by turning Sam into Captain America, which didn't tarnish the character that we've come to know. And I honestly can't wait to see Sam return as Captain America in the previously announced 4th movie that they are planning. Whenever that does come out, it'd be nice to see somebody else taking up the mantle of Captain America, and I'd love to see more of him as that character. So the show itself wasn't that great, but it still had a few memorable moments for people to talk about going forward. At number 7, I have the show What If. When I first heard about the What If series, I was actually pretty intrigued by what it was going to be about, because it basically showed us alternate realities where the characters we know, like Tony Stark and Captain America, Thor, and all of them from the MCU that we've come to know all these years end up taking different paths in their lives that lead to different outcomes. Or things happen in the MCU that didn't happen in the movies that we've seen, and it results in something else occurring. For example, in the first episode, we saw Peggy Carter get injected with the super soldier serum from the first Captain America movie instead of Steve Rogers, thus turning her into Captain America, or Captain Carter as people call her, instead. So like she got to do that instead of him. Honestly, it started off as a fun show and gave us that fun spin on how things could have been different for these characters, but somewhere along the way, Marvel decided that the show needed to have a main villain and needed to bring together all the characters we'd seen in other episodes to sort of mimic when the Avengers came together, like they formed their own team to battle this main villain. In my opinion, this didn't really need to happen. The show was fine how it was, where it just showed us all the different and interesting looks at these characters and the other outcomes that could have played out, or these different realities, because this was technically in the multiverse, so these things are happening like alongside of the regular MCU, just a different path. Like, I liked seeing that. I thought that was intriguing. And I didn't feel that it needed to have its own villain. I feel like they should have just gone with, they just do these 9 episodes that they did, or however many it was, and then just kind of show us this fun little look into what could have happened with these characters. That kind of made me like it a little less by the end of the season, if I'm being honest. I just liked seeing individual episodes with their own plot and their own characters, rather than seeing a crossover between some of the main heroes. That being said, the show was at least unique enough to stand out on its own when you compare it to like every other MCU movie or series that came out before it over the years. Plus, a few of the episodes might be spawning their own spin-off series as well, including the Zombies episode and Captain Carter, so we have that to look forward to as well. At number 6, I have the Hawkeye series on Disney+. If you haven't seen this series, I highly recommend you check it out, because not only was it one of the better series of the year, but it also gave us a look into the life of Clint Barton outside of him being a superhero. The show revolved around Clint basically trying to be with his family for Christmas, but he winds up getting dragged into a situation that he doesn't really want to be a part of at first. Because he ends up teaming up with Kate Bishop, who is one of the newest young heroes introduced in the franchise, who was a fan of his. She wanted to grow up and be just like Hawkeye. After seeing him in the Battle of New York when she was a kid, he was the first hero that she kind of saw from her window. The scene where he's jumping off the roof in the first Avengers movie. So I like how they kind of brought that together. So that's what inspired her to also want to be a hero and take up archery and all this other stuff. So she's kind of inspired by Clint. So he ends up teaming up with her to take down a group of thugs known as the Tracksuit Mafia. And the show did have a lot of like twists. Like, for example, not only is it revealed that Kate's mom has been secretly working with the criminals in order to fund her own business that she has, or she has a security firm or something along those lines. But the biggest reveal of the whole series is that Wilson Fisk, or the Kingpin, which was portrayed masterfully by Vincent D'Onofrio, might I add, he was behind all of this. I thought this reveal worked brilliantly with the overall tone of the story, and it made it feel more important to the MCU as a whole. And I feel like Kingpin could be like almost a Thanos level threat of like all these street bound Avengers, kind of like Hawkeye or Falcon, Winter Soldier, all these more grounded heroes that aren't like wizards and living in space and all that kind of stuff. So he could be that almost Thanos level threat if they do, if he doesn't just show up in the shows. Up until they revealed this, the series did a nice job of building to it. Like, they had hidden references and mentions sort of like the big guy, which turned out to be Kingpin, sprinkled in here and there throughout the show. While Kingpin showing up was huge, does have huge ramifications for the MCU going forward. I don't feel that it was the best part of the whole show, though, mostly because it didn't happen until the final 2 episodes, but I did like the build to it. I think the dynamic between Kate and Clint in this show was what really drove it forward and made it as great as it was. Like, they have kind of like a father and daughter sort of chemistry where like Clint's trying to protect her from the threats they're facing by trying to get her to leave. Like, he doesn't want her to be involved in this. He kind of just wants to do it himself so he can get home for Christmas. He doesn't want her to be involved because she might get hurt, but she keeps showing up anyways. So I kind of like, and he kind of feels responsible for her. So not only is he kind of forced to stick around and help her get out of the mess they're in, but he's also struggling to be home in time for Christmas. So I liked how that was the main focus of the whole show. The show was definitely creative and a lot of fun to watch, and it connected the characters together in a way that wasn't too complicated or confusing. And it even has its own spin-off show coming out soon that will feature one of the characters from the show, who's going to be called Echo. Honestly, it's hard for me to tell if I enjoyed the show just because it came out during the holiday season and, it was set during Christmas, or if it was actually just a fun show to watch. That's why I have it so low on this list. Other than that, it is worth checking out if you haven't seen it, and it was their last Disney Plus show of the year. At number 5, I have Black Widow. Now, hear me out for a second. The reason I have this movie at number 5 and a little bit lower than you would expect on this list is because I feel like there were better releases this year. Now, this movie wasn't all that bad, and it finally did give fans what they wanted, which was a solo Black Widow movie, which is something I guess everybody wanted for years. Overall, I felt like the movie was a nice tribute to the character, especially since it came out after her death in Avengers Endgame, even though it was set before that. And I think it perfectly detailed Natasha's backstory and history that had only been hinted at through dialogue in the past. It also introduced us to some new characters that are more than likely going to show up again in the future. Like we've already seen Natasha's sister Yelena show up in the Hawkeye series. So who knows who else from that movie we could see again down the line, like maybe the Red Guardian, which is her father, or one of the other Black Widows. My only gripe with this movie is the way it handled the villain Taskmaster. I like that they made the villain someone from Natasha's past that was trying to kill her, that being Dreykov's daughter Antonia, who everyone assumed was dead. But the way she was defeated as Taskmaster just kind of seemed a bit underwhelming. She just sort of like turned. I think they kind of like turned her good or whatever by the end after fighting Natasha. I would have liked to have seen Taskmaster escape before this final battle or something instead of being defeated so that she could show up again in a future MCU title and maybe take on another member of the Avengers like Hawkeye or even Yelena maybe somewhere down the line. I've heard a lot of people say how they didn't like this adaptation of the Taskmaster character, considering she uses like technology to study people's fighting habits instead of having that skill like the character did in the comics. But I didn't really think that mattered too much. Like it still worked for what they were going for. Taskmaster was a pretty cool villain, and I do hope that we get to see her again in the future. Overall, I'd say that the Black Widow movie was actually one of the better titles they've released this year, but for me personally, there were some things that were a bit better. At number 4, I'm putting Wanda Vision. Now, when I first saw this show, it definitely intrigued me because I'm a fan of like mystery shows and things like that. So the way that they put this show together using like a bunch of different TV show sort of formats while having an overarching mystery at the same time was pretty unique to me. Like, I remember when it started off in black and white for the first 2 episodes, and going in, you're immediately wondering, like, what is going on here? Because, you know, Marvel doesn't do sitcoms. Like, we've just seen them do movies, so, like, why is this a sitcom? At first, I thought, well, maybe Marvel's just, like, trying some different things, and they can mess around because it's on Disney Plus, and I wasn't sure if I would get into this show or not, but when I actually watched it, and they managed to put a reason in the show why it is a sitcom, that just kind of amazed me and actually caught me by surprise and made me like it even more. Like, we find out that Wanda Maximoff, who is the Scarlet Witch, is grieving over after Vision was killed in Avengers Infinity War by Thanos, and so she kind of goes to Westview, New Jersey, and sort of uses her powers to take over everyone's mind that lives there, and she creates her own little TV sitcom reality where she makes everybody act like characters that would live in a sitcom. But she even created Vision out of nothing, and created her own kids to like have this sort of sitcom family life. And I thought that alone right there was a unique twist on just everything we've seen in the MCU so far, and it shows how truly powerful Wanda actually can be and how dangerous she will be if she does become a villain later on in the MCU. Like, we know she's coming back in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But I thought that all the characters in the show were really good as well. Like, you had Agatha Harkness, who was the other witch that came in and was trying to interfere in Wanda's little reality that she created. And then you have, like, Tyler Hayward and the Agents of S.W.O.R.D. that are here to kind of investigate this whole thing. But as it turns out, you know, he was actually a villain, creating his own, like, white Vision, I guess, to go in and attack Wanda using Vision's body, which was really creepy when they revealed that, because it was like, okay, well, who's the Vision in Westview with Wanda? And here it turned out she created him. But I also liked how they used this show to sort of create a new hero in Monica Rambeau, who ends up getting powers after this, and she'll now be meeting up with Captain Marvel and even Miss Marvel in the movie The Marvels coming out, I think next year, in the next couple years or something. So she's going to be a big time hero now, and that all started because of her trying to get into Westview to contact Wanda, and because she goes in and out of there so many times, she ends up getting her own powers. So I like how they did that as well. They built a new hero and stayed consistent with an old hero that they had, and basically turned her into sort of an anti-hero now. And I look forward to seeing where else they go with the Scarlet Witch in the future, because this show made us realize how dangerous she really could be. At number 3, surprisingly to me, I put Spider-Man No Way Home. The only reason I think it's at number 3 and it wasn't like the greatest movie of the year and all that stuff is just because, like, I feel like they could have done it in a different way. Like, I kind of personally wanted to see how Peter Parker could deal with having to live his life with the whole world knowing that he is Spider-Man, because I mean that's what he had to do, but then he tries to get it fixed from Doctor Strange. I feel like maybe if they hadn't had Doctor Strange in this at all, don't have the multiversal villains, just have, the normal Spider-Man villains come after him after it's revealed who he really is. You could have Scorpion and them escape from prison or whatever and come after Peter Parker. I would have personally, I think it would have made me connect to the character more if he had to basically try and prove to everybody that he is a hero. He wasn't really a killer like Mysterio said he was, and prove why he is an Avenger. He would kind of be proving it to himself as well, while the whole world knows who he is as well, and he'd still have to try and protect his family and everything else. But I did like how they did the multiversal stuff and brought in these old villains from the past Spider-Man movies. I did a whole series where I went through and I went back and reviewed all the other live-action Spider-Man movies as well, so go check out those movies, or those videos, if you haven't seen them yet. So it was kind of a nice, nostalgic movie, and I said this in my review of the movie as well, so I'm not going to get too into detail about it. The only, one of the problems I had with this movie, though, was that how they brought in the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans into this movie. They were just kind of there after the whole multiversal incident occurred. And then Ned opens up portals and brings them in. I didn't really like that much, because they should have, showed up in an epic fashion at the end of toward the end of the movie or something. They should have shown up and helped this Peter Parker or something. I feel that would have been more impactful. But we still did get my favorite scene from the whole movie, which was the three Peter Parkers talking to each other, the other two trying to get, Tom Holland's Peter Parker to not feel this rage inside him after he wants to kill the Green Goblin for killing his Aunt May and things like that. So I did like that, where it's two previous versions of the character trying to teach this version of the character the flaws that they went through and how they overcame those obstacles and things like that, and didn't allow the darkness inside to sort of take over. So I kind of like that. But other than that, I don't think it was the best MCU movie of the year. That's why it's number 3. But it was just a fun, nostalgic movie to watch, and that's why I have it up a lot higher than some of the other things on this list, even though it wasn't my choice for the best Marvel property of the whole year. At number 2, I put the Loki series. This series was a lot of fun. Just Tom Hiddleston playing Loki is just, he fits that character so well. We've seen him since the beginning, in the first Thor movie, and then he was the villain in the Avengers. Comes back again for all the Thor movies and things like that. I thought it was funny just seeing all these different versions of Loki as well. There were a couple versions of him played by Tom Hiddleston, but then other versions, like an older Loki. There's one that's an alligator for some reason. There's a young Loki, and so things like that. It was really intriguing to see all these different versions of Loki that have been pruned and sent to the waste at the end of time, where they're just basically erased from existence in their timelines because they went off the beaten path. So it was a lot of fun to see all these Lokis interact with each other. So not only was it fun to see all these different variants of Loki throughout the show, but it was also fun to see how it ties into everything else that's going to be going on later on in the MCU with all the multiversal stuff. And I'm looking forward to season 2 of that as well. Now that just leaves number 1, which of course is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I had a lot of fun watching this movie. I really enjoyed how they brought in this new character. They explained things well, he was dusted and that's why he wasn't here for those 5 years. Plus he didn't have the 10 rings yet. He had to battle his father in this movie to get those 10 rings. The rings were sort of corrupting his father. Plus, his dad runs the 10 Rings crime organization. So like he had to deal with all of that. It dealt with family in unique ways, and how he can help his father without like having to kill him or anything like that. And Shang-Chi ends up getting the 10 rings at the end, which we find out in the end credits scene. Or well, as soon as he did that, it kind of activated a beacon to some other force out in the universe somewhere. So that's intriguing enough to warrant a second movie, for sure. Or maybe even that could play out in some Avengers thing down the line, where he's the reason that this thing comes to Earth or whatever. There were a lot of cool like fight sequences in this with like kung fu and everything else. So if you haven't seen that movie yet, go check it out as well. I think they introduced the character well, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next in the MCU, where Shang-Chi pops up, and what he does. Because right now, we last saw him, he's basically with Wong from Doctor Strange, so maybe we'll see him pop up in the new Doctor Strange movie. Who knows? But I really enjoyed that movie, and I thought it was the best movie of the year. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Did you enjoy any of these movies? Did I make the right choices on this list as well? What are some choices you would have made? Let me see your list down in the comments section as well. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. And thank you for watching this video, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.
Subscribe.